What if one quiet roster move told us everything we needed to know about the Cleveland Browns' real plan for Shedeur Sanders? Because while most fans were arguing about the offensive line, the play calling, and whether the Browns were doing enough to protect their franchise quarterback, the front office made a sudden decision that caught everyone off guard. A decision that hinted at urgency, pressure, and maybe even a little bit of panic. For weeks, Cleveland has been hammered with criticism about letting Shadur take unnecessary hits. Analysts called it reckless, fans called it embarrassing, and inside the organization, people knew something had to change. The trade deadline was gone, free agency options were thinning out, and the team looked one injury away from disaster. Something had to give. That's when the Browns pulled a move almost nobody saw coming. They reached into another team's practice squad, not for a future prospect or a depth stash, but for a lineman they wanted right now. A move that looked simple on paper but revealed a whole lot more beneath the surface. Because when a franchise promotes a practice squad player straight to the active roster in December, it's not casual, it's not routine. It's a sign that the pressure to protect Shadur has reached a breaking point. And the timing only made the story more interesting. As this signing hit the news, new clips began circulating. A viral warm-up video, comments from the offensive coordinator, fan reactions exploding online. Layer after layer that showed this move wasn't random, it was part of something bigger. From the moment Shedeur Sanders stepped onto an NFL field, one problem became impossible to hide. The Browns' offensive line simply wasn't built to protect a quarterback like him. Week after week, the same pattern kept showing up. Pressure collapsing too quickly, missed assignments blowing up drives, defensive ends getting untouched runs at the franchise's most valuable player. It wasn't just a weakness anymore, it was a full-on crisis. Fans saw it immediately, analysts called it predictable, and every time Shadur got hit harder than he should have, social media erupted with the same question: how long can Cleveland keep risking this? The criticism wasn't exaggerated either. His sack numbers climbed, his hurries spiked, and even casual observers could see that the Browns' offense spent more time scrambling than executing. Inside the building, the pressure grew just as fast. Coaches could adjust play calling, but that only goes so far. You can't build a sustainable offense around panic throws and emergency checkdowns. You can't develop a young quarterback if he never has time to breathe. And the front office knew it. Reports began circulating about rising frustration behind the scenes. Frustration with technique, with consistency, with personnel that simply wasn't getting the job done. The most glaring issue wasn't a single bad play. It was the pattern. One lineman would get driven backwards, another would whiff a block, and the entire protection would crumble. Fans weren't shy about calling it out either, especially the performances that repeatedly derailed drives. Posts poured in saying certain players needed to be benched, cut, or replaced immediately. Whether harsh or not, the sentiment reflected just how desperate the situation had become. But the most telling sign of all came from the coaching staff itself. Even during the moments where Shadur made brilliant, composed decisions under pressure, the praise always carried an undertone, a hint that decision-making wasn't the problem. Protection was, and everyone knew it. That's why the Browns' front office found itself backed into a corner. The trade deadline was long gone. Free agents were limited. Injuries had piled up. And the only way to fix things before the season slipped away was to take risks that teams usually avoid in December. So as the pressure continued building and the roster grew thinner, Cleveland knew it couldn't keep pretending the line would magically improve. Something had to change, even if it meant making a move fans weren't expecting at all. When the Browns announced they were signing Kendrick Green from the Buffalo Bills practice squad, the reaction wasn't quiet. It was instant confusion mixed with cautious hope, because this wasn't some routine depth move. This was a December decision made under pressure, and the timing made it clear. Cleveland wasn't experimenting. They were scrambling to protect Shedeur Sanders before things got worse. Green isn't a nobody. He's a former third-round pick, a 6'4", 315-pound interior lineman who's played meaningful NFL snaps for the Steelers and Texans. He's athletic, aggressive, and known for finishing plays with effort, traits fans have been begging the Browns to add to this line. But the flip side, his career hasn't exactly been stable. Inconsistency and injuries pushed him onto practice squads instead of starting lineups. So when Cleveland pulled him off Buffalo's bench and signed him to the active roster, people immediately started asking questions. Some fans saw it as a positive sign. They believed Cleveland might have found a hidden piece, a lineman who needed a fresh start and would bring more energy than the guys currently missing assignments. Others were skeptical, pointing out that if Buffalo wasn't using him, how big of an upgrade could he really be? Both reactions were understandable, but they also missed the bigger point. The Browns didn't sign Kendrick Green because he was a perfect solution. They signed him because they ran out of time to keep waiting for perfect. With the trade deadline long gone, injured players piling up, and veterans showing inconsistent effort, the front office only had one path left: poaching practice squad talent with upside. And Green fits that mold perfectly. Young, experienced, hungry, and most importantly, available immediately. The fan comments told the whole story. Some celebrated the move, saying, "Cut 68 right now, at least this guy will try." Others offered condolences to Green for joining a dysfunctional franchise. But buried beneath all the noise was one undeniable truth. The Browns finally admitted their offensive line needed help, and they weren't willing to risk Shedur's health any longer. Whether Kendrick Green becomes a long-term fix or a short-term patch doesn't matter yet. What matters is the message his signing sends. Cleveland isn't waiting for the offseason. They're trying to protect their quarterback now. And this wasn't the only sign that the team was quietly shifting its strategy behind the scenes. The Kendrick Green signing wasn't just a roster update, it was a signal, a clear indication that something inside the Browns' front office had changed. For most of the season, Cleveland acted like a team hoping their problems would sort themselves out. Patch the line here, adjust the play calling there. Trust the veterans to figure it out. But after weeks of watching Shedeur Sanders absorb hits no rookie quarterback should take, the Browns' patience finally cracked. What made this shift so noticeable was the timing. Teams usually avoid making major offensive line changes this late in the season. Chemistry matters. Communication matters. Mid-season linemen rarely make immediate impact. Yet Cleveland went ahead anyway, which tells you exactly how desperate things had become. Behind the scenes, the calculation was simple. If they didn't start fixing the protection now, they risked not only losing games, but losing their future franchise quarterback's confidence and health. And no team can afford that. Reports began circulating that the coaching staff and front office had reached a consensus, waiting until the offseason wasn't an option anymore. The trade deadline had slammed that door shut. Free agency offered scraps at best. So the Browns turned to the only remaining source of help: practice squads across the league. They weren't looking for perfect prospects. They were looking for players with upside, energy, and the willingness to fight on every snap, traits the current line had been severely lacking. And Green wasn't the only example of this shift. Insiders claim the Browns have been quietly evaluating linemen almost every week, calling agents, reviewing film, and searching for anyone who could stabilize the pocket even slightly. They weren't doing this in September. They're doing it now because urgency finally overtook caution. Some fans believe this shift is a sign the Browns are already building the foundation of a Shedeur-centered offense. Others think it's simply the front office trying to survive the season without embarrassment. Either way, one thing is clear. Cleveland realized too late that Shedeur wasn't just a quarterback. He was the biggest investment they've made in years. And failing to protect him wasn't an option anymore. But even as the front office scrambled, the coaching staff was already seeing a different kind of progress. the kind that doesn't show up in highlight videos but changes games. While the front office scrambled to find bodies who could protect Shedeur Sanders, the coaching staff was seeing something else, something quietly impressive unfolding beneath the chaos. Offensive coordinator Tommy Rees didn't try to hype it. He didn't exaggerate it. He simply laid out what he saw on film. A young quarterback making veteran decisions in situations designed to break inexperienced players. Rees pointed out that the opposing defense was one of the top units in the league on early downs, especially against the pass. They were disciplined, they disguised coverages, and they forced quarterbacks into mistakes. And yet Shedeur didn't panic. He didn't force throws into bad windows. He didn't get baited into risky shots the defense wanted him to take. Instead, he played smart football. He took checkdowns when deeper routes were covered. He found ways to keep drives on schedule. He avoided those dangerous third and long scenarios that had destroyed the Browns earlier in the year. Rees highlighted a specific moment, a checkdown that only gained 16 yards but swung the entire momentum of a drive. Not flashy but crucial. Not explosive but effective. It was the kind of decision that keeps an offense alive. That's what impressed Rees the most. Shedeur wasn't fighting the defense, he was adjusting to it. There were still moments, of course, where the coverage invited a deeper shot. And when that happened, Shedeur took it without hesitating. According to Rees, that balance, knowing when to stay patient and when to strike, was the exact growth the coaching staff had been hoping to see. But even as Rees praised Shedeur, the subtext was obvious. His decision-making wasn't the Browns' problem. The kid was doing everything he could with the hand he was dealt. The issue was that he had to play perfectly just to keep drives alive because the protection kept putting him in impossible spots. Rees didn't say that directly, but you could hear it between the lines. Shedeur's growth was real. His poise under pressure was undeniable. But no quarterback, no matter how talented, can carry an offense if he's constantly running for his life. And that's exactly why the Browns' next crisis came from the fans, because they were done watching the line fail him. If the Browns' front office needed a final push to take the offensive line crisis seriously, the fans delivered it. By the time Cleveland hit the midway point of the season, frustration had already turned into anger, and anger quickly turned into open revolt. Social media wasn't debating anymore, it was demanding. And the number one target, the offensive line. More specifically, certain linemen who kept showing up in clips for all the wrong reasons. Every time Shedeur Sanders got hit the moment he dropped back, fans posted the replay. Every time a defensive end ran free, they clipped it and added captions like "Cut him today" or "This is embarrassing." But it wasn't one isolated mistake. It was repeated breakdowns, often from the same players. So when fans started pointing fingers at names like Cam Robinson, calling him out there B-sing and begging the team to bench him, the pressure became impossible to ignore. Some fans were brutal, others were just exhausted. Browns supporters have lived through decades of inconsistent quarterback play, bad protection, and wasted potential. Now that they finally had a generational talent under center, they weren't going to let history repeat itself. That urgency showed in every comment, every reply, every thread erupting under posts about Shedeur's hits. And they weren't wrong. Analysts echoed the exact same concerns. Cleveland was playing with fire. You don't draft a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders to let him become another cautionary tale about what happens when poor protection ruins a young career. You build around him immediately, not next year, not after the draft, now. The reaction to the Kendrick Green signing made it clear how starved fans were for change. Even though Green was a practice squad pickup, supporters treated it like a sign of hope. "Anyone is better than what we have," one fan wrote. Another said, "If this guy has a pulse and effort, start him." That's how low expectations had fallen. But for all the frustration in the stands, the message was simple: protect your quarterback. The same quarterback who changed Jackson State. The same quarterback who helped transform Colorado. The same quarterback Cleveland now pins its future on. And right when the noise felt overwhelming, something unexpected happened. A clip that reminded everyone what made the hype around Shedeur impossible to ignore in the first place. Just when the criticism around the offensive line and the front office decisions reached its loudest point, a single video clip dropped and instantly changed the entire mood. It wasn't a highlight, a touchdown, or even a game-winning moment. It was something far simpler. Shedeur Sanders warming up before the Browns' matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. On the surface, it looked like a routine pregame moment. But for fans starving for reassurance, it became something else entirely. In the clip, Shadur looked loose, confident, locked in. He wasn't tense or rattled by the pressure surrounding him. He wasn't showing signs of frustration from the hits he'd taken the previous weeks. Instead, he had that same calm swagger he displayed at Jackson State and Colorado, the same energy that made him the center of attention long before he stepped into an NFL facility. And that confidence mattered, because after weeks of worrying whether the constant pressure was getting to him, fans saw a quarterback who wasn't shaken, not even close. Some supporters said it reminded them of his warm-up routines before huge college games, the ones where he seemed unbothered by expectations. Others pointed out that his footwork and mechanics looked sharper than ever, almost like he was using all the chaos as fuel. The clip also sparked speculation. Not negative speculation, hopeful speculation. Comments flooded in saying things like, "He looks ready. He's locked in for this one. Protect him, and this kid will dominate." Rumors even began circulating that Shedeur's focus has been on a different level in practice, though those claims haven't been confirmed. Still, the warm-up video reinforced the same idea. The quarterback's mindset hadn't wavered. What made the timing perfect was that it dropped right as fans were questioning whether the team around him was holding him back. Seeing Shedeur dialed in made the conversation shift from, "Is he in trouble?" to "Imagine what he could be with the right support." And support was arriving, not just through new signings, but through the return of a major defensive piece the Browns had been missing. Because while protecting Shedeur is priority number one, getting back one of the team's biggest playmakers signaled that things might finally be turning in Cleveland's favor. As the warm-up clip spread across social media and fans began feeling a spark of optimism again, the Browns delivered another piece of encouraging news: the return of Denzel Ward. And while Ward isn't part of the offensive line protecting Shedeur Sanders, his comeback signaled something bigger. Stability was starting to creep back into a team that had been fighting chaos for weeks. Ward's presence changes everything on the defensive side of the ball. When he's healthy, opposing quarterbacks hesitate. Receivers adjust their routes. Offensive coordinators rip pages out of their playbooks. His return doesn't just strengthen the secondary, it reduces the pressure on the offense by helping control the game's tempo. That means fewer long drives the offense has to compensate for, fewer desperate plays, and more balanced football overall. And for a rookie quarterback trying to grow week by week, that balance is priceless. Some fans pointed out that Cleveland's defense hasn't looked the same without Ward's ability to erase a whole section of the field. Others emphasized that a stronger defense indirectly protects Shedeur by preventing shootouts and keeping games within reach. Whatever the angle, the message was clear: his return mattered. But this wasn't the only sign Cleveland was finally waking up. Between adding Kendrick Green, adjusting game plans, publicly praising Shedeur's progression, and now getting key starters back, the Browns began shaping a new narrative. One that felt like the first step in building an actual structure around their young quarterback. For a franchise that has spent decades searching for consistency, these small shifts felt like major wins. The front office showed urgency. The coaching staff showed belief. The players showed support. Even the usually frustrated fan base started sensing something they hadn't felt in a while: momentum. Of course, not everything is fixed. The offensive line still needs serious work. A true WR1 remains a necessity, and the Browns will have to treat this offseason like the most important of the decade. But for the first time in weeks, it felt like the team wasn't just surviving, it was adjusting. And all of it led to one question fans couldn't stop asking. Is this the beginning of something real? The pieces were moving, the mindset was shifting, and with their franchise quarterback showing poise through chaos, Cleveland suddenly felt like a team ready to evolve, not implode. When you zoom out and look at everything that's unfolded over the last few weeks, one thing becomes clear. The Cleveland Browns are no longer just reacting, they're finally building. Piece by piece, move by move, they've started shifting from a franchise scrambling to survive into a franchise preparing to grow around Shedeur Sanders. And that shift didn't happen loudly. It didn't come from press conferences or hype videos. It came from urgency, pressure, and the realization that quarterbacks like Shadur don't come around often. The signing of Kendrick Green wasn't flashy, but it symbolized something important. Cleveland is no longer willing to tolerate the same old protection issues. They're searching, adjusting, experimenting, doing whatever they can to stabilize a unit that has held the team back for years. That's a major change from the front offices of the past. Tommy Rees' praise revealed something even deeper. Shadur is growing, even in the kind of environment that usually breaks rookies. He's reading defenses better. He's staying patient. He's learning when to push and when to take what's given. Those traits don't develop on struggling teams unless the quarterback has something special in him. Fans, despite the frustration, made their voices heard too. They refused to let the team settle for mediocrity, and the noise forced Cleveland's leadership to finally confront what everyone else already saw. Protecting Shadur isn't optional, it's the foundation of the franchise's future. Then came the warm-up clip, a reminder that Shedur's confidence hasn't shaken, even with all the pressure around him. And the return of Denzel Ward signaled a team slowly regaining its balance. A team that, for the first time in a while, looks like it understands the bigger picture. Will all of this be enough? Not yet. The Browns still need a true number one receiver. They still need major upgrades across the line. And they still need to prove that their front office shift isn't temporary. It has to continue into the offseason with even more urgency. But the signs are there. A young quarterback evolving, a fan base demanding better, a defense regaining its identity, and a front office finally showing it's willing to adapt instead of waiting for problems to solve themselves. If Cleveland keeps moving with this mindset, this season might be remembered not for the struggles, but for the moment the Browns finally began changing who they are.